Hey everybody, I'm back. I didn't go away. Just had a lot of stress at work, many different things occupying me for the past 2 months or so, but I'm back. And with me is my one of my frequent guests, J.R. Nyquist, a geopolitical analyst and author and blogger, with me to discuss the recent interview between Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and the former Fox News commentator, now independent commentator Tucker Carlson. We're going to talk about a bit about Tucker Carlson's fellow traveling, how his visits to the Moscow subway system and the Russian supermarket in Moscow radicalized him as a sort of populist conservative. I thought that was very interesting and concerning at the same time. And then we might talk about a couple of other topics if we have time left over. Jeff, welcome back to the program. How are we doing today?
Okay, thanks for having me, Nevin. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about because Navalny, the opposition politician and guy that's big on fighting corruption in Russia, has died in prison in Siberia. And his mother saw him last weekend, and he was perfectly healthy. And of course, Tucker Carlson gave this tremendous interview to Putin, who's obviously hesitated at trying a second attempt on Navalny's life after he tried to poison him with Novichok a few years ago. And now he's dead. And, Tucker Carlson gave such incredible publicity to Vladimir Putin. 2 hours and 7 minutes, Putin gets to hog the show, gets to sort of put Tucker Carlson in his place. And of course, Tucker Carlson continued giving pro-Russian propaganda afterwards. And I would kind of consider that Putin, what you hear is Putin said all kinds of contradictory things, right, in his interview. But you got to understand, people don't notice contradictions. They only hear narratives. So he's got a narrative for the Germans, right? Because he said in the interview that Poland was responsible for the Second World War because they forced Hitler to attack them. So the Germans loved that. The AfD people loved that. And then, of course, he spoke to MAGA. They like that. He made certain pretenses and noises for them. And he even gave something to the communists because instead of embracing Christianity, when the Christians weren't looking and the right wing wasn't looking, he said to Tucker Carlson, "Well, I believe in the laws of history," which is a tipping of the hat to Marxism-Leninism. And then, of course, he tipped the hat to Russian nationalists. So he was out there appealing to people who were on opposite sides of all kinds of issues. So there couldn't be any consistency in it. But Carlson, being the dummy he is, didn't notice. And of course, I count Carlson as an accessory before the fact in what I consider to be Navalny's murder.
Well,
How's that?
yeah, no, that sounds all accurate, and I agree with all of it. And let's unpack a little bit about Tucker Carlson. Now, there are some things from my populist economic views that I agree with Carlson on, but where he's terribly wrong, where you and I agree, where he's terribly wrong, is his positions on Russia. And I have some information that I'm sure, Jeff, you are aware of this already, but for those in the audience who might not be aware of this, there's a long history for several years of Carlson leaning heavily towards Russia and being an apologist for Russia and a
Hmm.
denier of Russia's threat. There is a Russian document titled For Media and Commentators. It was issued by a Russian government agency called the Department of Information and Telecommunications
Hmm.
Support. It instructed it is essential to use as much as possible fragments of broadcasts of the popular Fox News host Tucker Carlson, who sharply criticizes the actions of the United States and NATO, their negative role in unleashing the conflict in Ukraine, and the defiantly provocative behavior from leadership of the Western countries and NATO towards the Russian Federation and towards President Putin personally. And that's an old Soviet tactic to use voices in the West that will buttress the Soviet and the communist cause. They do this time and again. And now, of course, under the Russian Federation, under the control of United Russia and Putin, and the sort of Bolshevik culture that has continued. Um, here, Tucker Carlson in January 2022. He blamed American policy for driving China and Russia into being allies. On another occasion, Carlson had said, if we're really being honest here, Russia poses no threat to the United States at all. So pretty unbelievable here. And he posted that, it looks like, on a Twitter page, as a matter of fact. So Carlson is really wrong. Again, I think there are a lot of people that are just, you can't blame them on naivete and ignorance. I think you have many people that know exactly what's going on. These are educated people, but they, for whatever reasons, and I don't know why, because we don't have all the information. We don't know if Tucker Carlson received a fat bribe, perhaps, that we're not aware of. We don't know if Tucker Carlson genuinely sees the Russian leadership as this new incarnation of MAGA-style populist nationalism and Christianity. We just don't know. There could be a million and one different reasons. Maybe he is naive and deluded. Who knows? But this information is out there. People, when permanent normal trade relations with Russia in 2012, with China in 2000, was being debated, the facts were out there that these governments were serial human rights violators, that they had aggressive intentions towards the United States and NATO. This is all known. This is all brought up. It's just people choose to deny it. I recently came up with a little ditty here, and I say denial is the opioid of the intellectuals. And that's really what it comes down to. These are all inconvenient facts, gets in the way of their career. It's really cool for the part of the MAGA crowd to say, hey, Russia's not so bad. Look, all the anti-Trump people were against Russia and tried to link Russia and Trump. So what happened is that it propelled a formerly partially skeptical right that was skeptical towards Russia to embracing Russia in so many words, or just deflecting any concerns about Russia's continued threats. So, that's my response to Carlson. I think the biggest thing you and I disagree with Carlson on is his really awful view on Russia that's not rooted in reality. So regarding the interview, I think the biggest takeaway I got from the interview is Tucker was trying to delegitimize Ukraine from both the right in ways that would appeal to both dissident rightists as well as the Marxist-Leninists, tankies, and other assorted socialists, portraying Ukraine as a tool of NATO and the CIA, the pipeline, the Nord Stream pipeline, alleging that it was the CIA. That's appealing to the traditional anti-Cold War left, whereas with the right, he was saying that Ukraine was a creation of the communists, of Lenin. I mean, yes, he kind of then veered towards the pro-Soviet position under Stalin and his successors. So here, I think he's trying to link Lenin so he can make Ukraine look like, oh, it's just a Bolshevik creation in a way that would appeal to normally anti-communist American and other Western European conservatives. So I think Putin was trying to attack all sides, what the Russians and other communist countries do best is basically throwing everything against the wall, seeing what would stick, and seeing which would magnify the contradictions within the American political scene. And contradictions, I use the term purposely because that's a Leninist term. That's a communist term. And that's what the Russians are very, very effective.
By claiming that Ukraine is a creation of Lenin, which it was actually created by the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1918, and it was on the insistence of the Germans. The original and first Ukrainian regime was socialist. Just to let people know that, and they did end up aligning with Lenin, and they voluntarily joined the Soviet Union. And as Putin pointed out, when the Soviet Union was created, Lenin gave all the countries the option of leaving, right? But of course, it wasn't real. It's just like you have freedom of speech, but it's not real. Even in Russia today, they supposedly have freedom of speech, but they don't. So in a way, it was an administrative. Um, he's claiming that Ukraine was an administrative function. Um, that's what he's been claiming. So, but it's irrelevant. Ukraine has been a sovereign country for more than 30 years, and that sovereign country was embraced, and Russia promised to respect those borders. Russia promised in more than one agreement, including the 1994 protocols to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, known as the Budapest Memorandum, and this is the obligation of Russia. Ukraine was a nuclear power 30 years ago, 31 years ago, and they gave up their nuclear weapons on the promise of their sovereignty being respected. So I'm sorry, these are just Russian lies, and he invaded this sovereign country, Ukraine, with an army, and he has killed hundreds of thousands of young men, Putin has. And he doesn't care. He wants, the brutal thing is right now in the war in Ukraine is that he wants to take Avdiivka before his election, so he can brag about a military victory at the time of his election. Excuse me.
God bless you.
But that's what he's done, and that's pretty brutal. And I think you can compare Putin to many of the dictators in history, Julius Caesar, Napoleon, Hitler. You can compare him in that they brutally didn't care about starting wars that cost millions or hundreds of thousands of lives. It was their own glory that mattered. And the only difference between them and Putin is not as intelligent or talented as they were. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's not being very successful at it. They were much more successful at grabbing countries and running over people. So he's killing a lot of people right now. In Ukraine, people are dying right as we speak, and that's Putin's doing. And so there comes Tucker Carlson, who, from everything I can tell, does not know very much about Russia. Either he's pretending and lying about what he knows, or he just doesn't know. Because if he knew anything about Russia, he would not have interviewed Vladimir Putin. Because Vladimir Putin is not only a war criminal, by the way, over 80,000 war crimes are being investigated, committed by the Russian army that he sent in there. But Putin is a criminal. Putin has ordered journalists being killed. What kind of journalist, and this is just me here, if there's a political leader that's known to order the murder of journalists, and I forget what the number, it's between 80 and 120. I forget the exact number, and it depends on who's keeping count. But if this guy's killed dozens of journalists, and you're a journalist, and you kind of have some kind of respect for your own profession, you don't get in a room and interview him. You don't do that.
Well, unfortunately, I don't mean to interrupt, but that unfortunately hasn't stopped journalists throughout the century, literally a century, of giving favorable interviews to various bloodthirsty dictators and who are also geopolitical enemies of the United States and the rest of the Western world. I mean, Carlson, I think he's probably doing, it's very difficult to say what he's doing, why he's doing this. But he is building a career from it. I suspect he's trying to build his own brand, continue to build his own brand name, his own career, and distinguish himself, and really have pull within that.
Nevin, if you're a plumber, and there's a guy that murders the plumbers in the community, and he calls you because he's got a broken pipe, are you going to come out to his house and help him fix the pipe? Honestly.
But unfortunately, people are not going to look at it the way you and I look at it.
Oh, you mean they're scum, in other words, because in my view, somebody that goes and interviews a politician who kills journalists, and famously so, you're scum.
Yeah, that's what
I just want to say this to you, Tucker Carlson, you're scum, because you interviewed a person who murders other journalists. Well, why? How can you you can't justify that. If somebody murders a member of my family, I'm going to be nice to them. If somebody murders, let's say, like I said, a plumber, well, let's say you're a guy that works in computers, and there's a guy that kills software developers, and I'm a software developer. Am I going to develop software for him?
I just think people don't care. That's what you're saying.
They're
I was
scum.
trying
If they don't
to,
care about that, they're scum. Sorry, they're scum because
yeah.
there's such a thing as you got a profession. You're part of a profession. You're part of a group of people, and those people live in a kind of danger. And and this is what really is backwards, for Tucker Carlson to act as though he's the truth teller when Putin kills truth tellers, that
Yes.
he really cares about truth telling, and he's sitting down with this liar and this murderer. No, I'm sorry, it just undoes the whole thing. Because I thought Tucker Carlson was sincere. Of course, we found out that he pretends to support Donald Trump, but he really doesn't like him.
That's
So
right.
he lies. So Tucker Carlson lies. Oh, well,
Point.
okay, well, all right, maybe that's not so surprising. He lies and he pretends. So that means Tucker Carlson is not a journalist. Well, what was it Nietzsche said about Wagner? Wagner's not a composer. Wagner's an actor, right? In the case of Wagner. So then, yeah, I got it now. Tucker Carlson's not a journalist. He's an actor.
No, it's true. And you know what? Journalists have played a horrible role at times. Not all, there's many good journalists out there, but many elite journalists have long played a role in serving as fellow travelers and supporters. I mean, even our own CIA had KGB manuals. Colonel Lunev had revealed this as well, to cite a few sources. Former CIA officer John Morey revealed KGB training manuals, and they all said Yuri Bezmenov is another Novosti slash KGB collaborator. They all said that one of the top targets for the KGB recruitment were journalists, and many were extremely, according to Colonel Lunev, were extremely corrupt through
Oh
money.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
Well, we know there are scum in every profession. But let me ask you this. If somebody robs a bank and shoots a bank teller dead and you drive the getaway car, are you an accessory in that killing?
of course,
And if there's a murderous dictator whose lies facilitate his further murdering or help cover for his murders or encourage him to commit more murders, are you an accessory before or after the fact?
absolutely. Well, even it's not funny, but funny you mentioned that. Carlson, correct me if I'm wrong, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, and Jeff. I mean, I think it was Carlson that even said, look, governments kill people all the time. Basically, what's the difference about, Putin? Didn't he say
So he's going to snuggle up to every government that kills people? Wait a minute, what government? See, the thing is
something? Look, make sure I'm
that
right.
see, yeah, it's that's very interesting. So who exactly is trying to waltz with Goebbels now, who's been dead for 80 almost 80 years? Nobody. There are people who are war criminals and murderers, and maybe if they're in jail, you can interview them. Maybe if they're sorry for what they did and they want to tell the truth, you can interview them. But when they're still at the height of their power and they're still murdering people and you're giving them attention is going to help them in that? No, no,
Well,
no, that crosses a
and
line.
it's actually, because this came out a few hours ago, where Carlson said, "I have concluded this is about the murder or likely murder of Navalny.
Balney.
I have concluded the following: that every leader kills people, including my leader. Some kill more than others. Leadership requires killing people. Sorry."
That's moral equivalency. That's not an answer. Look,
That's
what
horrible.
he couldn't denounce Putin for that. Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing? I'm not
Yes,
hearing, oh,
he's saying
that's terrible,
he's
that's wrong, that's a crime to murder a journalist
he's basically
or to
condoning
murder a
murder.
politician. Sorry, what's that?
He's condoning murder, Jeff. That's what he's doing,
Yeah, he's
essentially.
condoning murder. It's just like me saying, look, you killed your sister. Oh, well, people kill their sisters all the time. It's no big deal, right? Uh, this is a funny thing. Which major political opponent of an American president has been murdered? Do we know of any in American history? Is any American, I mean, American history is very long. It's 200 something years. Do we know of an American president who had a political opponent murdered in jail?
I don't know.
You're a history guy.
I
No,
don't know of any.
there
And
is nothing.
you're a
There
big
is no,
guy.
I can tell you, there's no story that I know of, and maybe somebody can find something, where an American president put a political opponent, somebody that wanted to run against him, in jail, and that person died in jail. Never happened in American history. So what is Carlson talking about? I mean, as bad as corrupt as Joe Biden is, as corrupt as some of our presidents have been, and America's not perfect, we don't have any president that has murdered somebody who is a political opponent.
Well, and this is also the problem, too, as well with Carlson. It's like he's making the moral equivalence.
Yeah.
But it seems like he is metamorphosizing not only in justifying Russia's foreign policy, even their human rights violations, but now apparently Tucker Carlson is even starting to like the Russian economy and becoming very, in his words, radicalized too as well. Now,
Nevin, let me ask you a question. If the Russians nuke Chicago and Seattle and New York, or let's just say New York and Chicago. So if the Russians nuke it, Tucker Carlson's going to say, big deal. We nuked Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Right.
You know, countries with nuclear weapons nuke cities in other countries. It's no big deal. Is that what he's going to say?
Yeah, well, he is, because you're probably right. He is an actor. I mean, based on what he said behind the scenes about Trump, whether he's right or wrong about Trump, that's a different discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And we also know, I'm sorry, we know that there's an audience for the type of things that you and I discussed of what Tucker has stated over the years about Russia, now Russia's human rights violations, you know, variety of different things. He is trying to solidify and expand an audience within a certain political element or political current in American politics that's very vocal, that's very loud, and very mobilized. And he's probably doing it knowingly that Russia is a threat, that Russia is a serial human rights violator, that despite my very strong criticisms of American society, as I posted in a Twitter page, where I'm very critical of the prevailing economic and political system, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin are not the answers. And the problem is that Tucker, I would argue, is a gatekeeper or a shepherd that is quite possibly bringing people into embracing the Russian system. The Russian system is not the answer for America's problems, rest assured. I'm not telling you that, Jeff. I'm telling the audience that. But yeah, this is also something that's a hallmark of the Cold War and post-Cold War era left. Oh, yeah, Russia commits human rights violations, or Cuba, or Venezuela, or Iran, but you know, America has homelessness, America has poverty, America has police brutality, and all the rest of it. And what the purpose is really not to solve necessarily police brutality and homelessness and rampant poverty and everything else. It's to neutralize opposition and our moral and spiritual defenses against Russia, against China, against Cuba, Iran, Venezuela, etc. That's the real goal of what is termed whataboutism. That's the term of argumentation that Carlson and many others like him have used to neutralize criticism, to neutralize people like us. Oh, Russia, yeah, Russia invaded the Republic of Georgia and eastern Ukraine and wants to destroy all of Ukraine and, quote, denazify it. But hey, the United States dropped bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and Japan. The United States bombed and killed people with Agent Orange and other herbicides and bombs in Vietnam. That's what they're going to say.
See, people think that that you either have to see. This is what's really dangerous. You've got, like, I'm a person, I don't like the Democratic Party. I know, I've told people, I sat in meetings in the 1980s where they were talking about, the communists were talking about taking over the Democratic Party. And I think they've done it. I think that's what Obama was. I think that's what Biden is. I think that they're working with Russia and China. I think Biden is controlled opposition for Moscow. And if you look at the congressional report that came out in November on all the things that Biden has done to undermine Ukraine, having support for Ukraine that they desperately need arriving late, having the wrong kind of support, blah, blah, blah. I mean, Biden is not an honest player here. So I don't see Biden as Ukraine is his war. I don't see Biden as an honest person. I'm not for Biden. I get this nonsense from people saying, "Oh, you're a supporter of Biden. That's why you support Ukraine." No, I support Ukraine because I support people who are fighting for their freedom and fighting for their lives against a totalitarian aggression that's leveling their cities and kidnapping their children by the tens of thousands and brainwashing them and murdering civilians and blowing up supermarkets and gas stations and apartment blocks with missiles. And they're just trying to defend themselves. And it's outrageous. And it's outrageous. So, oh, then you're not on the right. Oh, then you're with Biden. You're with the commies. You're with all the enemies of all the godless, whatever you call them here in America. No, I'm not. See, now I have to be against both the right, the kind of right that Tucker Carlson represents. I got to be against them, and I got to be against the left. If MAGA becomes this thing that is basically eating off of Tucker Carlson's plate, then I can't be with them either, any more than I can be with the left. Then I got to go to Iceland and wait to die, because there's nothing here. There's nothing here. We got nothing but a bunch of monkeys. If this is what the best we can do is believe in this or that, believe in this form of murder or this form of murder. See, we can't be here. We can't be doing this. We can't be letting our enemy, China and Russia, say, the Chinese say, "Oh, so sorry, we're going to take the left side of the street, and you, Moscow, you take the right side of the street in America. And then we'll split America in half and we'll destroy it." Because that's what I think they're doing.
Well, the Russian television personalities have openly talked about dividing in America and creating and hoping for a civil war in the United States.
What's the latest rub on that, Nevin? Did you see that Putin has now officially come out to support Biden for president?
Yes, I saw that. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. He's probably.
Well, I'm really surprised he came out and said, "I believe in the laws of history," because that only a Marxist-Leninist can say that, and that's clearly what he's saying. And so now he's saying he supports Biden. So it's like he's getting less and less afraid of being himself. And it's almost like spitting in the eye of that idiot, Tucker Carlson. So tell me, Nevin, is Tucker Carlson just a useful idiot? Or
I think I think there's something else at play that's more sinister. I think he knows, he's aware of the arguments we make. It's all over in the mainstream press and the various news items.
So he's consciously flocking for a mass murderer.
I think he's
wants to blow his country up. Who's allied with his country's enemy, China, who also wants to blow up America and exterminate us. He's working with them. Tucker Carlson is. This is just too outrageous.
It is. It is outrageous.
It's outrageous. If there's any justice in this country, the people on the left and the right who have worked for our country's enemies, worked for the destruction of the American people, I hope you all go to trial one day. And I hope that those trials are fair, because I wouldn't want to hang anybody that wasn't deserving of it. But there's a lot of treason in this country.
Sure there is. Sure there is.
Adhering to the enemies of the United States, that's treason. And guess what? I'm an American. So are the rest of people born here in the United States and people who have acquired American citizenship. And if you don't value that, you can jump in a lake.
Yeah.
If you don't have that anymore, you're dead. You're just dead. I
agree. I guess I'm sorry I'm interjecting. I feel just as passionate as you and whatnot on this. But yeah, the bottom line is that I look at Russia as not only a serial human rights violator, that is the government, the military, and their intelligence leadership. They view the United States as its existential enemy, and that has never gone away, not during the Cold War, not in the immediate post-Cold War era. And the problem is that You have people out there, they know the reality, they deny it for careerism, for blackmail, for ideology, for whatever it is. You have people on the quote unquote right and left that support that. And they're more numerous than you would think. You know,
Evidently.
and that's just how, that's just how it is. In Russia, there were various Russian media personalities, religious leaders, others. They have all, for even in recent months, years, have been saying the best thing that could happen is a civil war in the United States with us breaking apart. I mean, I mean, it's just
I
all over
pledge
the place. I
allegiance
can
to the
pull up
flag
and,
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, indivisible.
well,
This
look,
is
I'm in,
how many of us have taken this pledge? Oh, a pledge, it doesn't matter. Oh, everybody just does that. We're really working for China for the cash. We're really helping Russia because we like that nice man, Mr. Putin. He's so wonderful. Yeah, he wants to kill you all. You know that? You know how many Ukrainians he's got? How many Russians, his own people he's killed because he doesn't care. What's a million Russians? We'll sacrifice a million Russians to take out Ukraine. Then we'll go for Poland and the Baltic states next. And then we'll nuke Chicago for good measure.
well, I mean, for them, we talk about it. I'm going to repeat this ad nauseum. To those who feel that Ukraine is not in America's interest, that Putin's a good guy, or whatever, and we could debate the degree of support that we're able to give, reindustrialization, so we can pump the arsenal of democracy, everything. That's a different discussion. But the fact of the matter is Dmitry Medvedev had mentioned 2020, the goal of the war in Ukraine and Russian foreign policy is to create a Grand Eurasian Union from Vladivostok to Lisbon. What does that mean for? That's not good for American interests because America has close trade ties with Europe, particularly Germany, where we import goods from, particularly Germany, other countries too. What does that mean? What kind of dislocation is that going to give the United
Well,
States?
it would make Russia 10 times more powerful economically than it is now.
Yeah, I mean, Russia
And
has always tried to work with German industry to combine Russian military force and German industry in one combined whole. What does that mean for the United States, which we've largely, not entirely, but largely deindustrialized? So, what does that mean? What does that
well,
mean?
they made a game. I think it's Fantasy Flight Games did a game. It was a remake of a game made in the 80s. It was called Invasion America, I think, or Invasion USA.
Mhm.
Oh no, Fortress America. The game is Fortress America. It was a game. So you can go out and buy that game. And in that game, you have one player is the Americans, and he's got North America there. And then the United States is being invaded by the Chinese Asian Confederation, the European Union Federation, whatever, led by the Russians. And then from the south, the whole continent of South America has got some kind of socialist union, and they're invading from the south. So it's a four-player game. One American player, three invading players, and then they just come at the United States from three sides. That's the game. I think it's Fantasy Flight Games. I'd have to check. But, if you want to really see how that plays, how ugly that is, what is and of course, if America could even survive the embargo, imagine all those countries just cutting us off from trade. Imagine that.
Well, and Lenin and Stalin called it the rear of imperialism, that the developing world would have all this control of minerals, raw materials, and they would cut it off in the imperialist economic system, which will collapse, monopolize capitalism essentially. And that's the
Well, I
point.
guess the rear of imperialism would be a well done rump roast if you got to that point.
Well, there would be too many shortages in under that socialistic hyper command economy, so there would be no rump roast for the average
Yeah.
person.
Well, when Rome was at risk for being burnt by the Catilinarian conspiracy back in, what was it, 60 BC, Cato the Younger made a speech to the Roman Senate. And he said, well, I can't appeal to you on your patriotism, but if you want to save that nice furniture you have, or all the nice stuff you have, you better rally to the Republic.
Yeah.
You better rally to them now, because there isn't going to be anything left if they burn it all to the ground. Because you got no clarity. Everybody is so disoriented. And then if they're not disoriented, maybe they're demoralized. So what do we have? Do you think, let me ask you a question, Evan. Do you think Trump is going to go against this interview that Tucker gave with Putin? Do you think he's going to criticize it? Or do you think he's going to be right there with Tucker? Is this gonna move Trump closer to Putin, even though they've all accused him of being Putin's puppet? I mean, what do you think? What do you think about Trump and all this?
That's an interesting question. I mean, Trump is also very malleable, and he's easily shaped and influenced. And in some of his domestic economic policies, where they were debating, for example, the so-called Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017, you had different competing groups. You had the economic nationalists in the room, dinning in Trump's ears. Then you had the big business Wall Street people that were putting the sort of Reaganite plutocratic tax things dinning in his ears. And the last person in the room won the argument with Trump. And ultimately, that's what happened with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. It was more anti-working class, anti-economic nationalists, because Paul Ryan in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce had the last word. The problem is that Trump, we know he's not a Golitsyn partisan, even though we know he was exposed to it. My concern is that Trump has to do a balancing act. There are the traditional Republicans, the sort of Reaganite Republicans, whatever their faults, that are more critical of Russia, that want more aid to Ukraine. That's one part of the party. The other part of the party,
Nikki Haley?
the Nikki Haley, at least on the surface. The other side is the MAGA, many within the MAGA movement that want to cut off all aid to Ukraine yesterday. And they
Marjorie
would be
Taylor Greene, right?
Correct. And they're competing for Trump's attention. How that's going to end up, I don't know. We know from Trump's first administration, and this is something Putin admitted to, back in 2020, this was reported, where Putin said that, look, under Trump, he was bad because he withdrew from the INF Treaty, and there was an attempt to revitalize the American military. But on the other hand, American trade with Russia increased under Trump. And our trade deficit with Russia got even bigger under Trump. Now with Biden, Putin didn't like aspects of Biden, but liked other things about Biden and the Democratic Party. He said that, well, under Biden, despite the sanctions and the strong positions against Russia, well, under Biden, he wants to renew the New START treaty and the INF treaty that Trump wisely withdrew from, by the way. And we have things in common with the left wing of the Democratic Party, is what Putin said. So I think when we look at American politics, it's not an either-or proposition. I think there are shades of Trump and Biden that Putin can work with, and Putin is looking for openings in the enemy political camp, and that's what he intends to do. I mean, there were things that the Russians did not like about the Trump administration that they were very vocal about it during the Trump administration. I don't think in the outset that Trump is going to go against Tucker, because Tucker's audience is largely also Trump's voter base.
Have you seen any statement by Trump about Navalny? At least Biden made a statement about it, condemning it and saying that Putin probably was responsible. Yeah. Well, here's something. This is from Joseph Pieper's Abusive Language, Abusive Power. It's a nice little book. Everybody should have this little book. And I just thought I'd read something here about what Plato thinks public discourse is for, or the kind of thing we're doing here, Nevin, should be about. And there's three statements that Plato basically made. One is that to perceive as much as possible all things as they really are, and to live and act according to this truth, right? Isn't that what we should do?
Yes.
And the second statement is all men are nurtured first and foremost by the truth. Not only those who search for knowledge, the scientists and the philosophers, everybody who yearns to live as a true human being depends on this nourishment. Even society as such is sustained by the truth publicly proclaimed and upheld. Third statement. The natural habitat of truth is found in interpersonal communication. Here, this is what we're doing here. Truth lives in dialogue, in discussion, in conversation. It resides, therefore, in language, in the word. Consequently, the well-ordered human existence, including especially its social dimension, is essentially based on the well-ordered language employed. A well-ordered language here does not primarily mean its formal perfection. No, a language is well-ordered when its words express reality with as little distortion and as little omission, Tucker Carlson, as possible. And that's what's wrong with Tucker Carlson. That's what's wrong with his interview with Mr. Putin. It's what's wrong with everything that's been going on here in the United States on both sides of the political fence for the last few years. And it's pretty much you're all going to die if you don't get this right. Because being in contact with reality and being able to talk about reality when there's nuclear weapons and biological weapons coming from China and Russia and other countries trying to get at you, if you don't sort this out, you're dead. Because America, it's a very vulnerable place when we got a senile leader and we got a goofball opposition journalist running pranks like he just did.
Oh, I wouldn't call it pranks. I would call it propaganda. Quite a bit of his propaganda. And then after the interview, his travel around Moscow, and this will be the last.
Well, that was the prank I'm referring to. The going to the supermarket and pretending he understands that what Russians can afford. Because the fact of the matter is the average Russian salary is $700 and something a month. Right. And the average Russian spends half of that on food. So Tucker Carlson can go in there and say, oh, everything's so cheap here, because on an American salary it would be. But that's not what Russians make.
Right, exactly. Well, that's true. And the other thing is that, and from my position, I posted this on Twitter, and, look, Tucker's views on, obviously, what's going on in America. Okay, I understand that, but Russia and China are not the answers. You want to implement those systems, impose those systems in the United States and giving propaganda aid and comfort. It's not the way to solve the problem. Russia, the average Russian citizen, it's not exactly across the board, everyone in Russia is doing very well. China, the same thing. They have massive corruption. They make our plutocratic corruption look like a kindergarten.
Oh yeah, no, it's unbelievable. Russia is on the scale of corruption. Russia is way more corrupt than Ukraine. And but let me ask you this. This is what Tucker Carlson has had all these interviews with Douglas McGregor, Colonel Douglas McGregor. I've interviewed Douglas McGregor.
Oh really?
Oh yeah, I interviewed him years ago on my radio show, and I spent hours talking to him off air on the phone.
Well, do tell. Back up. Stop traffic. What's his story?
Well, I interviewed him about, what was it, the Battle of 78 Eastings or whatever it was, the tank battle he was in that he won against in the first Gulf War against the Iraqi Republican Guard tank unit in the fog, close range. He got to brag about that. But he's got some very peculiar ideas, I thought, which he told me off air. But what's really interesting to me is that why I always wondered when Tucker was on the air at Fox News, he had this this goofball Colonel McGregor on all the time. Now I understand, good tank commander, won a tank battle against the Iraqis, fine. Lousy military historian, lousy military analyst. Just because you can command a tank battalion doesn't mean that you know anything about analyzing wars. And I point John Mosier, he's an academic historian. He's got brilliant analysis of this war. He's the one guy I know, there might be others I don't know, who called this Ukraine war from the beginning, who said Russians aren't going to win, they're going to get hurt doing this. He said that from the, I called him, I contacted him after the first week of the war. I got in touch with him by email, and we had a bunch of email exchanges. And he's written, writes about an essay every month about the war, and he's amazing. And he's written a lot about the Russian military. He's written about the American Civil War. Really great analysis. I'm amazed at the guy. But you get Douglas McGregor comes on Tucker Carlson, doesn't get anything wrong. On day 10 of the war, he says, oh, this war is already over. Ukraine is lost. In 10 days, the Russian army will have finished them off. No, it's 2 years later, Nevin. Today is the 16th. In another 8 days, it's going to be exactly 2 years since the Russians invaded. And so Douglas McGregor, so why, see, there's the question is, why is Douglas McGregor the go-to military guy, even though he's been wrong all along? And can't Tucker Carlson remember? Does Tucker Carlson, do you have a memory, Tucker? This guy was wrong, giving you all this news about the war all along, and you're still talking to him up to, what, a month ago or December when you interviewed him last, I think? And he's still giving you this line of nonsense, and you're still listening to him? That's either a sign that, what do you got, Alzheimer's? The guy's wrong. The guy's been wrong. And guess what? You know that McGregor sounds exactly like Scott Ritter. And Scott Ritter was an arms control inspector that went home one day with a Russian/Georgian wife after inspecting in Russia. Wonder how that happened. Oh, no, he got convicted for soliciting sex from what he thought was a 14-year-old girl on the internet. And it was actually a police officer.
Yeah, well, one question and then a comment that I'm trying to interject. My apologies. Did Colonel McGregor always have these sort of benign views on the threat of Russia and China to the United States, or did he sound like us when you interviewed him?
No. My interview with him was about this battle he fought against the Iraqis, and he'd just written a book about it. And but he has this weird way of military analyzing people. For example, he told me, he said, the Israelis are really poor at war. The Turks are good. The Koreans are great at war. The Russians are great at war. You know, he had these idea that certain ethnicities are better at war. They're just intrinsically better at war than others. Like the Turks would clean the Israelis' clocks. The only reason the Israelis look good is they're fighting the Arabs, who are like at the bottom of the barrel of people knowing how to fight wars, this kind of thing. So that's what I got from him, you know. And that was the extent of his political analysis, that he had this kind of war is like cooking, you know. Some ethnic food tastes better than other, right? I mean, I don't know. It was pretty strange. That's all I could say. That was what I heard. And, you know, I don't know. You know, that's not my cup of tea. I don't believe in that, but it was interesting. So, and then I listened to him talk about the Ukraine war, and it's like, oh, the Russians are cleaning the clocks. The Russians know how to make war. Oh, the Russian army's first rate. The Ukrainians are just dying in droves. There's what he said, 500,000 or 400,000 Ukrainian dead, he said 2-3 months ago. I mean, it's ludicrous. Just completely, his numbers are ludicrous. His analysis is ludicrous. He's pulling things out of there. He's making things up. And there's Tucker Carlson, giving him all this attention. And then all these, I get on these talk radio shows and people go, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, Nyquist. You know, we just heard Douglas McGregor with Tucker Carlson. It's like, you did notice that everything he predicted didn't come true, right? And it's all the opposite. People, but you see the thing, and it's funny, I remember this one caller called me a year later into the, you know, the first year of the war and the second year of the war. He calls me up. I think I talked to him just a month and a half ago, this one caller. And I said, don't you remember? He said the war was over. Ukraine had lost. And it's like a deer in the headlights. It's like it never occurred to him to ever check whether they're because you see what people are. This is what people do, Nevin. This is why Tucker Carlson is so famous. They only listen. They don't listen. Facts don't mean anything to them. It's just like Yuri Bezmenov said, you can't do anything with them with facts. All they hear is a narrative that they bought into, right? See, a narrative is like a fairy story, like Puss in Boots or Old Mother Hubbard or, you know, um, whatever fairy tale you want to invent. And if you hear something that rhymes with, sounds like the fairy tale, you perk up and you go, yeah, that's right. And there doesn't have to be facts. It just has to be similar to what you've already heard and somehow believed. And then you affirm it. Not paying attention to any facts, not remembering any details, not even knowing where Ukraine is on the map. That's what you do. I mean, as far as I can tell, that's what people do. And I've been on shows after shows. I've talked to the public, and this is what I hear. This is what I've heard. And you know what? If you're that stupid and you don't want to do your homework, why don't you watch Netflix movies or something? Watch cartoons. If you're not going to pay attention, if you're not going to listen, if you're not going to read a book, here, read a book. Find out something that's true. Your words should actually relate to reality, not just to a fairy tale that you're told. And so all of them, this is the trouble. This is the trouble we have. If we have a political system where people are all talking past each other with narratives and memes, and nobody's paying attention to facts, we're dead. Because that invasion there in Ukraine, that's the Russian army, and look what direction they're moving. They're moving in the direction of our allies. Ukraine's the buffer state between Russia and NATO. You know what you have to do to attack NATO? You have to get rid of that buffer state. That's what they're doing. Once that buffer state is gone, you're right on the border of NATO. Now they have a little bit of border of NATO up in the north, but you're right there and you can attack along the whole line. And guess what? NATO is not ready for war. They let all their arms factories go. They let their weapons go. The Germans destroyed, 3,500 of their tanks. They destroyed them, unlike the Russians who mothballed theirs. They're 10,000. So you got nothing. And America has 10 divisions. Russia has 100 divisions. Probably could mobilize 200. Who knows? We don't even know what they can do. Their arms industry is gearing up. Now, thank goodness the Ukrainians have stopped them. But we're going to cut off the ammunition to them so they can get through. I mean, does this sound like a good idea for America? That then Europe's not defensible? And as you said, the Russians want to take over all of Europe. And people say, no, they don't want to do that. Did you listen to Putin on that thing? He was justifying Hitler in that interview with Tucker Carlson, and Carlson didn't say anything about it. Oh, dictators, they kill people, that's fine. Oh, Hitler killed people, that's fine, it doesn't matter. Our people kill people too. People who kill people are the luckiest people, evidently, because Tucker Carlson is flocking for them.
Indeed.
So, and then you have what happens if we don't defend Europe. You got something going on in Taiwan because we're planning to bring 8 aircraft carriers, 5 American, maybe 2 British and a French aircraft carrier all at once to China, to the Far East. Have you heard about this?
Yeah.
Well, they're moving all this fuel over there, and there's, I interviewed Mr. Wang at Luda Media recently, but they are hearing rumblings. Something's going on. There's a couple of experts in North Korea saying, hey, North Korea might be thinking of attacking the South this spring. I mean, this could be it. Right? So if we can't defend Europe, we can't defend the Far East, all these countries get gobbled up, or it's nuclear war. What are we going to do, Nevin? And have we been getting ready for World War III? I don't think so. And you know what all these numbnuts say, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and a lot of people on the right? They say, oh, it's NATO aggression in Ukraine. Wait a minute. NATO wants to destroy Russia. How come we haven't built a nuclear weapon since the Cold War ended? How come we don't have enough ammunition even to support Ukraine? If we're planning some kind of an aggression on Russia, see, this is why Putin had to change the transcript. Putin's people had to change the transcript of the interview to leave out the part where Tucker Carlson was ready to read the little statement that Putin had given in 2022 saying that there was a threat to Russia from NATO. Well, see, he doesn't want that read because everybody knows it's a joke. Everybody knows it's a joke. NATO's not ready for war. If NATO was plotting on Russia, they would be ready for war, and they're not.
Jeff, there were NATO countries until just shortly before the war in Ukraine. There were NATO countries, notably France and Germany, that were providing, and possibly Italy and Britain, that were providing weapons to the Russians.
Well, the
And
French were providing military electronics to the Russians. That was what was on the Russian tanks.
no,
And
but like
look,
literally weapons, not
it,
even dual use stuff.
look
Weapons.
weapons. Yeah, look at who is so scared that they want to be part of NATO now. Finland and Sweden, countries
Mhm.
that have never been part of an alliance. I mean, Finland is Finlandized. Sweden hasn't been part of an alliance since the Battle of Nations, since they helped defeat Napoleon in 1814. I mean, that's the last time Sweden was involved in a coalition war or in any war. Sweden's been neutral this whole time for 100 and, oh my gosh, it's 200 years. Sweden's been neutral for more than 200 years, and they want to join NATO. You know they got to be afraid of something.
And Finland at one time, in some ways, was a de facto member of the Warsaw Pact, as Major General Jan Shana revealed, that in case of World War III during the Cold War, Finland would have uh, leaned towards the Soviet Union and would open up its ports and airfields. Now they're scared poopless of the Russians, as you pointed out. So yeah,
So
it's
there's
really
something we
scary
don't,
situation.
there's a lot to this. And so I'm sorry if you are on the right and you're afraid, oh no, our boys are going to go to Ukraine and die. No, our boys are not going to Ukraine and die. The Ukrainians are fighting and dying for us. Aren't you lucky? But if you don't support them, your boys will probably end up fighting and dying because you have just shot down 700,000 perfectly good Ukrainian soldiers that are willing to fight for your security. And you weren't willing to do anything to help them. So now they're not going to be there to help you. You do understand that, right? I
Yes,
hope
and
people understand that.
the roots of this, I would argue, is back from the late 1980s when the Soviets had a program to eliminate the image of the enemy. And its purpose was is to break apart American anti-communism and to neutralize it and just break it apart and make it go away. And look, long term, it's been a success. Look what's going on. You have both elements of the American right. You have the libertarian, neocon, Reaganite, free trade, whatever you want to call it, all falling over themselves to, with Obama, to give Russia permanent normal trade relations, which further opened the doors to high technology exports to Russia's military and industrial machine. Then you have the so-called populist, conservative MAGA crowd, many, not all, but many, who view Russia, oh my God, Russia's anti-woke and Putin's anti-woke and he's Christian and he wears a cross and the this and the that. He's a nationalist. He has clean
No,
airports,
no, he's not. He's
subways,
not
and
a nationalist and he's not a
and
Christian.
he
He's just a
rides his horses bare-chested, unlike Biden, who's a sissy, and this is what they believe. And this is purposely crafted, in my opinion, to win these people over and to divide
yeah,
the. This is
it
again the
is. Yeah.
image of the enemy, and
And
this is
if somebody wants a civil war in this country, you got to understand that we can't have a civil war here because the Russians are gonna and the Chinese are gonna invade us. They're gonna bomb us and invade us.
sure, and they'll do it under the cover. If I were them, I would tell the world that we basically want to neutralize America's WMD stockpiles, its nuclear missiles and all types, and then we got to do that to save the
Yeah.
world and whatever. And
Yeah, and what Mr. Wang told me was, they got a Ho Chi Minh Trail running through Mexico right up to the U.S. southern border that Biden has opened up so they can bring Chinese and other special forces in here to disrupt America before some war happens. So what do you think is going to happen, Nevin? So let me ask you, uh, really, what do you think, Mr. Carlson, for his interview with Mr. Putin, what do you think Mr. Carlson deserves as a reception from the American people when he gets back to America?
scorn. I mean, I give him scorn, basically, on that. On that note, I think he deserves scorn. But there are so many people that deserve scorn, and I don't feel that people are entirely stupid or naive or deluded. I think people are more knowledgeable and educated than they let on, but they put careerism or other interests above really relaying the truth or protecting the country or doing the right thing by the people.
Well, I think what you said before is true. They don't care. So they don't care to learn. They don't care to know what's going on.
No,
And of course, it's too much work to do homework because really, like I said, Tucker Carlson is not a journalist. He's an actor. Biden is not a president. He's an actor. Maybe Trump is not what he claims to be. Maybe he's just an actor too. Maybe this is the syndrome we've fallen into in this age of television, that everybody is just an actor, that they're just acting, that they don't have any positive knowledge, and that they're all they're just ignorant and in a giant stew pot waiting to boil.
I think when they don't care, I don't think they don't care not to learn. Some of them, I would agree with you in that. Others, no, you bring the facts. Here are the facts. You read through it, and it's incontrovertible. What I'm saying, I am giving facts. I don't like it. I'm not saying I'm right about everything. There are aspects that I might be wrong, but the core fact of Russia being an expansionist threat to the United States in league with China is really not much to dispute. So you show that in front of a person, they still deny it. They know it. I believe they know it's true deep down. There's a portion of these folks that know it's true, but they don't care. They choose that somehow they can escape it or it's not going to happen. They don't care. And, it's like the billionaire elements who trade with Russia and China. They know the poop is going to hit the fan. They build the bunkers. They leave their own people to literally die from occupation and, mushroom clouds and poison gas while they're hiding in their bunkers. They know the poop is going to hit the fan, but there's no connection with these individuals with the people of the United States and the destiny of the United States. And I think that's the problem with a portion of them. Now, could I tell with certainty every single individual? I think everybody is unique, but I think Carlson knows what's up. The problem is he puts his career over everything else. I mean, Trump is snuggling up to Carlson while Carlson backstabbed him behind him. Yes, your book, I recommend this book. That's all I have to say.
Origins of the Fourth World War. I started writing this book, 37 years ago, almost. And I basically said all this was going to happen. I basically said we were going to be in this position that we're in now, where they can just attack us willy-nilly. That we were going to be so weak and disarmed that it was going to, it was just think about this. In the 1980s, Reagan was president, and then we won the Cold War. But my whole thing in this book was, no, we didn't win it. Because I knew, I wrote the book before because Golitsyn, defector testimony, was saying they're going to fake the collapse of the Soviet Union. They're going to get us to get rid of anti-communism and stop making nuclear weapons. Oh, guess what? We did. And we were going to build back down from 27 divisions down to 10. And guess what we did? And we're going to go from what do we have, a 500 ship Navy almost? Or did we have a 500 ship Navy? Now do we have 300 ships, or are we below that now? I mean, it worked, right? The Russians played possum. The Chinese built up. The Russians built up. They're united now, changing the balance of power. He predicted that, by the way, 1984 when this book was published. He predicted that there was going to be the next Soviet leader was going to be a liberalizer. Guess what? That was a year before Gorbachev came to power. Oh, wow. How did he know? How did Anatoly Golitsyn know? And so I wrote about it. I realized what was going to happen in advance. And it took me from 1987 to 1992 to write it. And then I published it, and I got it published. I self-published it in 98, and then WorldNet Daily Press published it, second edition in 99. And I can't believe it's been how many years and nobody listens. Well, I've been telling them this for, and it's like, you gotta be pretty disgusted when you look at these politicians and these journalists and these intelligence people and these experts and these professors, and it's like, you didn't do your homework. You didn't read all the literature on this. You didn't read what their strategies are. You didn't listen to the defectors. So you don't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on. Right? It's
Yeah.
ignorance. It's ignorance.
Well, I think there's
So,
willful
so
ignorance, and I think people know the truth. They just choose not to do anything about it because the truth is not lucrative. The truth is not going to open the career
Well,
door.
why would you bother learning about the truth when all you have to do is pretend to care about it, like Tucker Carlson, and then just do whatever pays, right?
That's part. That's
Why would you have to? I mean, so pretty soon you stop caring about the truth, and the truth is kind of whatever you decide it is, because you point the camera and you put the microphone in the place where the person is you're going to call the truth out on. And so you got Tucker Carlson doing exactly that. Well, isn't that what they do at CNN? Isn't that what they also do at Fox? Isn't that what they do on every side? And the
true.
Russian foreign ministry and Washington and everybody's. So what is the truth then? Where is correct orientation? Yeah, I think it's very disappointing because you would expect there would be some adults in the room who would say, excuse me, there's a thing called a nuclear weapon and we haven't built one in 33 years, 32 years, and we better start building them. Oh, but wait a minute, we better have started building them 15 years ago because it takes you 15 years to start to build them, right? And here we
Yeah.
are. So are we going to survive, Nevin? Is the United States going to survive as a country, or are we going to get slaughtered here? Are we going to be suffering a horrible fate?
Well, let's just put it this way. I hope it's not going to turn out like that video game that you Invasion America or
It's not a
Invasion.
video, it's a board game. Fantasy Flight Games. It's a
I
board game.
just hope.
Little plastic pieces, yeah.
I
Yeah.
just.
Invasion,
No.
Fortress USA, for Fortress America, sorry, Fortress America. Yeah, Fantasy Flight Games. I think it's probably, I don't know if it's still available. Look it up online and see. Go buy one for the whole family, right? Play it a few times. Then say, when you realize you're playing over America and it's getting blown up, um, ask yourself if you want this game to be reality. Just keep letting your politicians do what they're doing.
Well, to end on that bleak note, do you have any closing comments? And where can people find your written works, your books, as well as your blog?
jrnyquist.blog, and I put videos, audio interviews, and essays on there every week, some combination of the above. And if people want to follow the latest outrage, but if you want to try to piece it together, my idea is, look, I'm a strategy person, and the bottom line in reality is that not he who has the most toys wins. He who dies with the most toys wins. It's he who kills the other guy with the better weapons wins.
Mhm.
It's really history is a series of wars interspersed with short periods of peace, sometimes longer periods. And I think Russia and China have been at war with us without us really acknowledging it. And they've used all kinds of different sneaky things to do to us. And among those things, they've mentally disarmed us. So we're intellectually disarmed.
Mhm.
And I think that's the most dangerous disarmament of all. And if we don't get that fixed, there's not going to be an America. There's not going to be a free world. It's going to be China and Russia, and they're going to exterminate a lot of folks.
Well, I hope you're wrong. I hope I'm wrong with what I've written, but unfortunately, I don't think we are wrong. I think we're unfortunately more correct than not. And well, a very bleak note. I haven't done this in a while. I
No,
forget
it's
how.
not bleak if everybody gets up off the couch and does something. It's not bleak. If people educate, look, it might take you 6 months to really get up on this. Um, But you better start putting it together now. You better start figuring it out because your life and your family and your country's at stake.
You got to definitely pay attention what's going on. Check out Jeff's books, Origins of the Fourth World War, Jeff's blogs, Galitzin.
The lies we believe in on Amazon and The Fool and His Enemy on Amazon.
Yep,
Yeah,
there you
go
go.
for it. Yeah, and jrnyquist.blog.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us. We'll do this again. The show is back on the saddle. We're going to have a variety of other guests coming up, rekindling my collaboration with some other streamers. So we're getting the show back on the road. Thank you, Jeff, for joining us. Thank you all for listening. Have a great evening. Enjoy your weekend. God bless. And let's hope and pray for our national security. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.